Dear friends, it has been a very informing and inspiring experience to listen to the exchange and candid and open discussion between people who clearly belong to the same family. The exchange of views and different understandings and analysis of your situation in the United Kingdom especially, but also with regards to Ireland, has been really, I don't know if eye-opening, but really informing, and I'm really grateful for the possibility to organize this meeting together with the partners here. So thank you for involving us also from CEC. When I was coming here yesterday on the plane, I was reading this magazine with a nice picture of Mrs. May, and, but I'm going to read a quote which is not directly linked with her. I'm sorry. It's a quote which reads like this: "I need to exercise my civil rights if I don't want to live my life complaining about the country in which I was born. It is wrong to say that nothing depends on us. Of course it does." This is a quote from a 20-year-old demonstrator from Moscow last week. And I think it points to an issue which has been here also discussed in the way we reflect on the Brexit vote: participation, being part of a society, a community. And probably that is one of the challenges where the European Union also has not succeeded. And I think it's a good reminder to remember, to hear this quote from Moscow, to be reminded of the fact that Europe is broader actually than the European Union, and that there are European people, European young people across the big continent, even in the unknown land of Russia. And that we, in our aspirations, in our views of the future, are united. And if there, just to point to that still, in terms of for your information, if there were demonstrations in 99 cities of Russia a week and a half ago, that really means that something is going on. We'll see where it leads, but at least something is going on. And the demonstrators were under 20 and a little bit over 20. So that is the voice of the really young generation from there. Somebody asked the question yesterday, if Christian aid didn't exist, would we be able to found an organization like that today? That is a very good question. Often we say, if CEC didn't exist, we'd had to invent it. But if CEC didn't exist, would we be now able to form an organization like CEC? Europe had around 20 million refugees after the Second World War. If we had 20 million refugees today, how would we handle it with the attitudes and ideologies we now have about migration? These are questions that somehow we need to deal with. We need to put our challenges and our possibilities into some relation with the world in which we live and with the history where we come from. If CEC didn't exist, we'd had to found an organization like that. Yes, but the heyday of great ecumenical organizations is past, I'm sorry to say. CEC will never be great again, and it doesn't need to be. There needs to be a different kind of approach. I think there was a kind of a development optimism in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century and a little bit afterwards, where we also gave a role in our minds to organizations like the World Council of Churches or Conference of European Churches, which we thought, if they were not super churches, they were something, they reflected a future community of churches, how churches should come closer to each other. Now we see that this vision didn't really materialize. These organizations were not the avant-goût, the foretaste of future ecumenical unity of churches. The unity of churches is a different, a deeper goal, which is not served through this kind of international organizations as we are. So the question remains, do organizations like CEC or the World Council of Churches still have a task, anything to give? I think the ecumenical movement is not weaker, although our organizations have become weaker. I think the ecumenical approach, ecumenical mindset, is part of the reality of our churches in many more ways than we think. It's on all levels of church life, and it has a lot of expressions. There are lots of ecumenical networks on the local, national, international level, very specified, special organizations who serve different needs for cooperation among churches. So the question remains, does an umbrella organization like CEC have a task in all of this? I think it must, because the key question for Christian unity and for our way towards Christian unity still remains ecclesiology, our understanding of what it is to be church in different situations, different contexts. One of the most interesting meetings we had last year was a meeting on migration and ecclesiology. How does migration change our view, our self-understanding as churches? So I think one of CEC's tasks is to be a forum of churches, a forum where the churches meet each other, a forum where the churches bring together the different challenges they encounter, the different issues they want to deal with. And, of course, this forum needs to formulate a voice of the churches in the European discussion. I think it's the role only an organization such as CEC can fulfill. And I think it's a role that we need. But we need to position it in this geography of ecumenism now, and to realize what is the focus of the work of an organization like CEC. And as I just said, I think there is a great lack, a great kind of emptiness in the gaze of our political leaders now. There is the vision for future is very uncertain. So that is where we as Christians should have a contribution to make. So let us work on that. As it has been mentioned here, but I repeat it for all of us to remember, Conference of European Churches is an organization of 115 member churches, soon to be 116. And we have one application from this country and another one from elsewhere, from Belgium actually. So that is the number we are, and we are in 40 countries, as it was mentioned here also. We are from Canary Islands to Vladivostok, if we take the whole geography. Of course, the Russian Orthodox Church has suspended its membership, as some of you may remember, from 2009, but we are working on, with hope, that we could find a solution before the next assembly. Well, God knows. But that is the kind of organization we are in. 40 countries, 115 churches, 20 organizations in partnership, and about 20 national councils of churches in these islands, as you know, also. And this is the network with which we work. We have, in 2016, we have concluded and survived a reform which was started in 2009, and it has resulted in a more flexible and a more focused administration for CEC, which I think responds better to the size of the organization and of the work. One concern we have, and it is a very, very clear concern which comes to us from different meetings with people from different countries, is that with the smaller decision-making body, the governing board, we have lost, or many churches feel they have lost the direct contact with the decision-making processes of CEC. So we need to think of ways to improve our communication with our smaller member churches. And small member churches is not a marginal group in CEC. If we have 15 big churches, we have 100 small churches. So that's a real concern we need to address at the Assembly. As it was also mentioned, our General Secretariat moved from Geneva to Brussels, and just last year, the last office room was, the rent was terminated, and the bank accounts were closed, so now all the operation is in Belgium, plus an office in Strasbourg for our relations with the Council of Europe and other contacts in Strasbourg. And this office is seconded and financed by the United Protestant Church in France, plus the organization of churches along the Rhine. And so in Brussels we are the main office. At this moment we are 13 people working in the office. Will be at least one person more in a few weeks' time. So 14 in Brussels, 2 in Strasbourg. We are smaller than CEC in 30 years. But that's the same fact with all similar organizations as ourselves. And with this theme, we are already, of course, deeply involved in preparing the General Assembly, which is number 15, if you count General Assemblies from 1959. And it will be held 31st of May to 6th of June in Novi Sad, in Vojvodina, in northern Serbia. If you look at the map of Europe, and you find the river Danube, and you find the middle of Danube, the midway between the sources and the mouth, it is there. That's where Novi Sad is. And it means that it's quite in the middle of Europe, but it's outside of the European Union. So it's the selection of the General Assembly was this decision had some idea. Also, it's important that we are invited by the official decision of the Holy Synod of the Serbian Orthodox Church, which is an important fact in our history. Also, there are many other churches present and cooperating ecumenically in Novi Sad, so we are going into an ecumenical context. The assembly will be a little bit smaller than the previous ones. The number of delegates is reduced, but we do calculate that we will be around 400 people altogether. And the church's delegations will be smaller. You will receive a letter these very days giving you this technical information, and the official announcement of the assembly will be made by the governing board in the beginning of June. And when you do appoint your delegations, we are reminding you in the letter that you should take into account the balance of different experiences of church. So if you have one delegate, it may be difficult to think of all the balances, but if you have two, you can at least have a woman and a man, and a clergy person and a lay person, somebody over 30, somebody under 30. Two people, you get lots of possibilities. Also, we will involve 40 international stewards, so all your churches are welcome to encourage your young people to apply as stewards. This will come towards the end of the year, the application process for the stewards. The theme of the assembly has been decided. It's a quote from the first chapter of Acts: "You shall be my witnesses." And this reflects the question that many of our churches are discussing. what is the mission, what is the task of Christianity, of Christian churches in Europe today and tomorrow. We have been talking about the fact of migration, how it changes the religious landscape of our countries, of our societies. But also in many countries there are changes taking place in the church-state relationship. That is also a question of self-understanding and a question about the Christian presence, Christian contribution in European society. So the theme reflects these kinds of concerns and questions. The theme has been interpreted then with 3 biblical words which will structure the work of the Assembly. The program of the Assembly will be structured by the words witness, justice, hospitality. And they will also be the themes for Bible studies and keynote addresses. The Assembly will be rather short. We will only have 4 working days plus a Sunday. And that means that all the work of the Assembly, both in terms of reflection, reporting, and then decision-making for the future, needs to take place during these days. So the discussions we have had here are part of the introduction of the Assembly. We were so many from the CEC office here in order to take these messages further. And we will continue this work in 2 more consultations, as we have mentioned, one for Southern Europe and one for Central Europe. And then we are planning also some smaller meetings on the same thematics. What future for Europe? And this discussion will be taken into the Assembly, and we'll have a special plenary session on the results of these discussions. And these inputs from our work, from these consultations, and the input brought by the delegates from the churches will hopefully then help us to define the tasks of CEC, to define an answer to the question if CEC is needed and for what tasks for the churches. What are the urgent priorities in which CEC needs to concentrate? My personal view at this stage is that we need to have fewer priorities than we had after Budapest. But that is always a difficult task to try to be. And the other clear thing, which is also part of our, which will be reflected in the program of the Assembly, is that Europe is not an island. We are part of the world, we are part of humanity on this globe, so the global nature of our reality needs to be reflected. Middle East and Africa need to be visible in our Assembly. And this kind of work, we hope, will lead towards the next stage in the life and work of CEC. A colleague of mine said that this is the last chance for CEC. So let's take it seriously. Any questions or?
Yes, questions to Heikki?
You're all a little bit ready for lunch and saturated with all the discussions, I'm sure.
I think you gave a clear indication of where the Assembly is going and things like that, and we all look forward to it. And
I look forward to seeing all of you there, and in other instances.
Oh, sorry, Charles.
Really pleased, and thank you very much indeed for your helpful contribution. I was kind of just wanted to pick up on one thing you said about your desire to move to a kind of smaller number of working areas, and kind of recognise, as you say, that that's going to be a very problematic process. How much do you see that process playing out? Will there be opportunities between now and the Assembly for further consultation to identify that particular themes? Or would it be left to the Assembly itself and you're doing it from that floor and somebody then says we need to do, you actually end up with more kind of working themes than you have now, so you go down that route. Just interested in how you're going to handle that.
As I said, these consultations that we have now are sort of introductory discussions leading to the assembly, but we're not talking concretely about how to focus KEC's work in these consultations, but I'm sure that the issues mentioned here will be taken and will influence that work. In more concrete terms, of course, we have the input which will come from our thematic reference groups, who will all, of course, advocate for their priorities, and if we take up all of them, it'll be more than enough. but that is another channel for the Assembly to receive reports and be able to discuss things that KEC has been working on in these last few years. And more concretely, the Assembly Planning Committee will have to have a discussion in these terms. How do we formulate how do we move from the reporting and reflecting part into the prioritizing part and decision-making part of the Assembly. And of course we have the Governing Board, who I think needs to have an understanding about this. Not saying that we have all the Assembly discussions beforehand. The Assembly will have a role here. And then the new Governing Board elected at the Assembly, I'm sure, will be left with the finalizing touch. Hopefully not too much, because that would give, if the Assembly is not able to prioritize clearly, there will be power which will move into the hands of the Governing Board, and if the Governing Board is not able to prioritize, then the staff will have the power. You know this from your organizations and our histories. So the process really needs some concretization on these different stages. Mr. President.
Thank you. I appreciate, Heikki, your accurate description of how bureaucracy is and democracy works together. And there is never a power vacuum. It moves around, that's all. More seriously, well, that is serious. Lord Acton had a lot to say about things like that. It also requires the next Assembly to be, and I'm going to use an English word now, which Anglophone people may want to explain the kind of nuances. An Assembly has to be continent. Yes, there's giggles, you see, as well. So an Assembly has to be continent. There is sometimes the understandable desire of the different members of the Assembly or groups to raise their particular point. Now, this may well be in the main line of what, but it may not be, and there are limited resources. Now, we're all familiar with that in our church assemblies, in our synods, in our councils. It's always a problem, but I hope that we may have some way of encouraging the Assembly, and many of you will be perhaps at that Assembly to bear that in mind, to keep the focus on the priorities we must engage with, remembering the limited resources and we cannot do everything. And I speak as an Anglican, where Lambeth conferences every 10 years have been consistently incontinent. I say I leave it to the Anglophones to explain to those language is not first, not English, particularly vulgar, rude connotations is all I'm saying.
Jeremy? Sandy?
3 Anglicans in a row is probably a very bad thing. But if I could just leave it. I was really intrigued by your opening comments about the role of ecumenical instruments in a different kind of age, when they don't have a kind of eschatological value that we once seemed to have. And I think I heard you say that their distinctiveness is in bringing churches together, which means that part of the quality of their reflection is that it has an ecclesiological dimension, which you wouldn't necessarily expect to find in an organisation that's bringing churches together or Christians together around a particular issue or area of concern. Did I hear you right on that? And so I'm just wondering, what a strong ecclesiological dimension would look like for a letter on the future of European values, virtues, and the rest of it.
This is, of course, a very broad discussion which you open like this. But I think the priority of ecclesiology for CEC was defined by the Budapest Assembly. And we have not really been able to work very much on that. So we need to continue in some form. I don't know if it's under the same heading or some other way, but to work on this question, what kind of a forum of churches are we? And when churches engage in a forum or in a council, how does that reflect and influence our self-understanding? How are the churches accountable to each other? How do they grow closer to each other? How does this common growth influence their own ecclesiology, if it does? And I think that is the specific nature of our organization. And the things we do maybe should be in some relation to this main focus. But now I'm speaking sort of my own mind rather than a commonly decided decision. But there has been some good work in councils of churches around the world on this question, and to concentrate on, or somehow have the focus on churches relating to each other is of course what nobody else does. So it's really our niche also. Yes. But what kind of an organization will help the churches to come together is a big question. And I'm afraid the Assembly even will not be able to find concrete answers on that. So that discussion needs to go on among people who are concerned with CEC and who work with their churches' ecumenical relations. You said that the Assembly should be a continent. I would say that CEC needs to be a space station, to use a different image. If CEC should be a platform where the churches come together and then they connect, the space station connects with different projects for maybe not eternally, all of them. The churches are good at doing new things but bad at stopping doing old things. So that is also true for ecumenical organizations with limited resources like us. So I think that it's somewhere there is the discussion that we need to be engaged in for CEC's future.
Thank you very much. Just a question. I'm concerned that you might say something more. You said this may be the last chance for CEC. Perhaps it's related to what you've been saying. To hear you say something more about that, because it seems to me, regardless of whether the developments in Europe as a whole, big Europe if you like, are malign or benign in the future, surely churches are committed to consult and work together and reflect together. So I'm puzzled by your phrase of that.
Yes. I'm convinced that the churches need each other. We need each other as churches, and we need fora where we come together. And CEC needs to be a forum like that. But so my quotation should not be taken too seriously. But there is a seriousness in it because, as I mentioned, ecumenical organizations are not fashionable. Ecumenism as an ism is not it's not enthusing our people in the way it was 50 or 60 years ago. So there is a real challenge that we need to be able to show what is the added value of working together in CEC. That was the meaning. I do believe there is an added value, and I do believe we can show that. But the questioning is there. And I remember from WCC Assembly in Harare, 97 perhaps? 98? Yes. A fellow delegate from another church than mine said, it's interesting to be in this last assembly of the World Council of Churches. So he had this kind of doubts in his mind, but they didn't come true. So I'm with the same kind of humor.